Once upon a time, in the bustling metropolis of New York City, there lived a young woman named Sarah Chen who possessed a brilliant mind that had become her greatest enemy. Sarah worked as a marketing executive at a prestigious advertising firm where her analytical prowess had earned her recognition and respect. Yet beneath her polished exterior lay a tormented soul, trapped in an endless cycle of overthinking that threatened to consume her very essence. Every morning, Sarah would wake up at precisely 6:30 a.m., and before her feet even touched the cold hardwood floor, her mind would begin its relentless assault. What if the presentation she had prepared for the afternoon wasn't good enough? What if her boss discovered that she had made a mistake in last week's campaign analysis? What if her colleagues were secretly plotting against her? These thoughts would spiral and multiply like bacteria in a petri dish, each one breeding a dozen more worries and anxieties. Sarah's overthinking had become so severe that it paralyzed her decision-making abilities. She would spend 30 minutes each morning deciding which route to take to work, analyzing traffic patterns, weather conditions, and potential delays. She would rehearse conversations in her head for hours before important meetings, scripting out every possible response and counter-response until her brain felt like it might explode from the pressure. The irony was not lost on her that someone whose job required quick, decisive thinking had become completely incapacitated by her own thoughts. Her apartment reflected her mental state, cluttered with self-help books, productivity planners, and sticky notes reminding herself to stop thinking so much. She had tried meditation apps, therapy sessions, and even considered medication, but nothing seemed to quiet the storm raging in her mind. One particularly challenging Tuesday morning, Sarah found herself standing in front of her office building, unable to enter. She had been analyzing a simple email from her supervisor for over an hour, dissecting every word, punctuation mark, and possible hidden meaning. The email simply read, "Sarah, please see me in my office at 2 p.m. today. Thanks, Michael." But in Sarah's overthinking mind, this innocent message had transformed into a harbinger of doom, a pink slip disguised as a meeting request. As she stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching her colleagues enter the building with confident strides, Sarah felt completely alone in her struggle. Little did she know that her life was about to change forever, thanks to an encounter with the most unlikely teacher she could have imagined. An elderly man approached her, dressed in a worn but clean janitor's uniform. His name tag read, Frank, and his weathered face bore the lines of someone who had seen both joy and sorrow in equal measure. Frank had been observing Sarah's daily routine for weeks, noticing how she would pace back and forth before entering the building, how her shoulders carried the weight of invisible burdens. "Miss," Frank said gently, "you look like someone carrying the whole world on your shoulders. Mind if I share something with you?" Sarah, surprised by the unexpected interaction, nodded hesitantly. She had always been polite to the building's maintenance staff, but had never engaged in meaningful conversation with any of them. Frank smiled warmly and continued, "You know, I've been cleaning these floors for 37 years, and I've seen a lot of people like you. Smart, capable, successful on paper, but miserable on the inside. Want to know what I learned from watching thousands of people come and go through these doors?" Intrigued despite herself, Sarah found herself genuinely curious about what this man might have to say. There was something in his demeanor that suggested wisdom born from experience rather than textbooks. "The people who seem the happiest," Frank said, "aren't the ones who never have problems. They're the ones who've learned a simple truth. Most of the things we worry about never actually happen, and the ones that do happen are rarely as bad as we imagine they'd be." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "I used to be just like you know. Spent my 20s and 30s analyzing every decision to death. Lost a marriage because I couldn't stop questioning whether my wife really loved me. Missed opportunities because I was too busy planning for every possible scenario instead of just taking action." Sarah felt a chill of recognition. Frank was describing her life with uncanny accuracy. "So what changed?" she asked, genuinely invested in his story. Frank chuckled softly. "My father died when I was 38. Cancer took him in 3 months. During those final weeks, I sat by his bedside, and he told me something that revolutionized my entire approach to life. He said, "Frank, I've spent 70 years on this earth, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that 90% of the things I worried about never happened. The other 10%, I handled them just fine when they came up. Don't waste your life preparing for disasters that exist only in your imagination." The simplicity of this wisdom hit Sarah like a lightning bolt. Here was a man who had lived through real tragedy, real loss, real challenges, and his perspective was refreshingly clear and uncomplicated. Frank continued, "That day, I made a decision. I called it the 5-minute rule. Whenever I catch myself overthinking something, I give myself exactly 5 minutes to consider it fully. I write down the worst-case scenario, I think about what I can control and what I can't, and then I take action or let it go. No exceptions." "But what if you make the wrong decision?" Sarah asked, voicing the fear that had paralyzed her for years. "Then I deal with the consequences and learn from them," Frank replied matter-of-factly. "Here's what I discovered. Making a wrong decision and adjusting course is almost always better than making no decision at all. Indecision is a decision. It's choosing to let life happen to you instead of actively participating in it." Over the following weeks, Frank became Sarah's unofficial mentor. Every morning, he would share another piece of practical wisdom gleaned from his decades of observation and experience. He taught her the difference between productive thinking and rumination. Productive thinking led to action and solutions. Rumination was simply mental masturbation that accomplished nothing except increased anxiety. Frank introduced Sarah to what he called the reality check method. Whenever she found herself spiraling into overthinking, she would ask herself 3 questions. Is this thought helping me solve a real problem? Can I do something about this situation right now? If the answer is no to both, why am I giving it mental real estate? He also shared the concept of good enough decision-making. Frank explained that most decisions in life don't require perfection. They require adequacy followed by adjustment. The goal wasn't to make perfect choices, but to make reasonable choices quickly and then adapt as new information became available. Within a month of implementing Frank's strategies, Sarah's life began to transform dramatically. She started arriving at work refreshed instead of exhausted from mental gymnastics. Her productivity increased because she was spending less time planning and more time executing. Her relationships improved because she was present in conversations instead of mentally rehearsing what she would say next. The most remarkable change came during a major client presentation that would have previously sent her into weeks of anxious preparation. Instead, Sarah prepared thoroughly but efficiently, practiced her presentation 3 times instead of 30, and then consciously chose to trust in her abilities. The presentation was a huge success, landing her team their biggest account of the year. Sarah realized that overthinking hadn't been protecting her from failure. It had been preventing her from success. All those hours spent worrying about potential problems could have been used to develop new skills, build relationships, or simply enjoy life. 6 months later, Sarah was promoted to Senior Marketing Director. In her acceptance speech, she thanked her team, her supervisors, and a wise janitor who taught me that action beats analysis every single time. Frank, who had been invited to the celebration, simply smiled and nodded. After the event, he pulled Sarah aside one final time. "Remember," he said, "the goal isn't to stop thinking altogether. Your mind is a powerful tool. The goal is to use it intentionally instead of letting it use you. Think when thinking serves a purpose, then act. Trust yourself to handle whatever comes next." Today, Sarah teaches Frank's methods to other chronic overthinkers. She's discovered that her story isn't unique. Millions of people are trapped in mental prisons of their own making, analyzing their lives instead of living them. The techniques that transform Sarah's life aren't complicated or revolutionary. They're simple, practical tools that anyone can implement immediately. The 5-minute rule, the reality check method, and good enough decision-making have helped thousands of people break free from the paralysis of perfectionism and embrace the imperfect action that leads to actual results. Now it's your turn. Right now, as you finish reading this story, you have a choice. You can analyze these concepts, debate their merits, and think about maybe trying them someday when conditions are perfect. Or you can choose one overthinking pattern that's been holding you back and apply Frank's 5-minute rule immediately. What's one decision you've been avoiding? What's one action you've been delaying because you're waiting for the perfect plan? Give yourself exactly 5 minutes to think about it. Write down the worst-case scenario, identify what you can control, and then take the first small step. Stop reading. Start doing. Your life is waiting for you to stop thinking about living it and actually begin. The time for overthinking is over. The time for action is now.